Hi, I'm Paul Brodsky, manager of McElroy University. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your being here. You know, with everything going on in the world today, things are quite different. And one of the things that many of us have had to do that we're not used to is the fact that we have to quarantine. And, you know, we can't get out the way we used to do and go to the movies and go to restaurants or whatever activities that we like to do. But one thing is for certain is that learning never quarantines. You know, something else that we've had to manage throughout the year is just the fact that it's been so disruptive. So as we think about all that, I want to start with a quote which goes like this. It's times like these, when long-standing patterns are disrupted, that things become more fluid. And that's when a small group of people, or even a single individual, can change the course of history. Now, this is from a TV show called Dark Matter, and it originally aired in 2016, but I think it really applies to the situation we all find ourselves in today. The long-standing pattern of training, of course, is the instructor standing up in front of the students, and everybody gets together in the same room, and maybe some classroom and some hands-on and so on. However, with everything going on, that has all been disrupted. We've had to become more fluid, and we've had to look for new and unique ways to provide the type of training that people still need because they still need to get out onto the job site. So I want to start my presentation with a quick update from INFUSION20. So what I'm referring to in this case as the old new normal. So we hear the term new normal a lot, and we used it last year, and now that new normal is now old. But one of the things we introduced last year was our new online format. Now, we had been doing online training before INFUSION20, but we rolled out our new learning management system, some new courses to go along with that, and I'm happy to say that it's been very well received. We've received a lot of really great feedback, and one of the best things is that every student who has come through has talked about how much they enjoyed it, and it was not a barrier at all to any kind of training for them. In fact, it enhanced the overall experience. One of the other things we introduced was the requalification program. Another great program that allows qualified operators to requalify for less money and less time away from the field. So they don't have to retake the entire class. They just go through the requalification process, and then they can renew their qualification for another 2 years. Then we modularized our operator qualifications. So instead of just being small, medium, and large like we had in the past, operators could choose to get qualified in socket, sidewall, manual, medium hydraulic, hand pump, large hydraulic, data logger, and since INFUSION20, we've also added a Talon qualification and a line tamer qualification. So this format allows operators to get just the qualifications that they need for whatever particular jobs, and of course they can build up their qualification over time. But one question that I was asked a lot last year and have been continued to ask was, what about the inspector qualification? What's going on with that? Anything to expect there? So didn't have a whole lot to report last year, but we've been hard at work on that. And this year we do have some announcements with regards to inspector qualification. But first let's take a look at what the legacy system was. The material itself was very similar to the operations training. So it had a different focus to it. You know, obviously this was for inspectors and not operators, but if you had been through the operations class and then came to an inspector qualification class, a lot of the material was going to be similar. We also provided for a lot of hands-on practice time, and the idea was that, you know, the inspectors would like to have as much time as they can to get on the machines themselves. But the end result was the class ended up being a very heavy focus on the fusion process how-to. In other words, how to operate the machine, how to follow the standard, and that aspect of it. So it was a great class. People continued to come to that class, and we always got good feedback. But at the same time, the industry was asking and is asking for more. So here's what inspector qualification for McElroy University looks like moving into the future. So first of all, we completely revamped the curriculum. We looked at every single slide, every single presentation, every single test question, and we've updated everything from top to bottom. We've added a lot of new material, got rid of some material that didn't really apply quite in the same way, but everything is very new, very different, and it's a great new course. We've also modularized the inspector qualification. So it was popular last year with the operators, and then we had inspectors saying, well, I'd kind of like that too. Maybe I only need qualification for, say, socket or sidewall or butt fusion. So you'll be able to do that now as well. We've also made electrofusion as its own modular qualification. And then we're adding a new one, which is for hot tap. So there's been more interest in hot tap over the years, and we want to make sure that inspectors have that opportunity to get a qualification very specific to that. I do want to point out that initially the changes that we've made to the inspector qualification are for the polyethylene world and a focus there. However, we do have a polypropylene inspector qualification on the roadmap, so be on the lookout for that. Okay, so continuing on with the future of inspector qualification, one other big change is that we are converting this class to a 100% online self-paced class. That means that students will be able to log on to our learning management system, enroll themselves, go through the class, take all the tests online, and when it's done, they'll have their inspector qualification, assuming they passed everything. Well, obviously, in order to do that, we have to make some pretty significant changes. And I already mentioned about the curriculum, but another big change is the testing process. So we've enhanced the testing process quite a bit. And you'll see this manifest itself in a number of ways. And one of them is we'll have, during the online material, students will have what I call test your knowledge questions. So these are questions that pop up, and if they don't get the right answer, we give them the answer, but nothing prevents them from continuing on with the class. However, there will be other miniature tests along the way where the student must pass that test in order to continue on with the class. So if they haven't mastered that material, they can't go on, but once they get to the end, they'll take the written test, similar test to what's in the past. Obviously, it's been new and updated with some new materials, but they'll take the written test online, they'll take an online version of the hands-on test, and then assuming they pass all that, then they get their qualification, they're good to go. Something else that has changed in this is the way that we will present this class. So we're often asked, do I have to have previous experience before coming to the inspector qualification? Well, our standard answer has always been, well, it's helpful, but if you're at all familiar with Fusion and if you feel like you can pick up on the process well and the materials, then sure, come to class and you'll probably do okay. Because of the way the material has changed and the more intense focus of this particular class, you'll see us now presenting this as where previous experience is highly, highly recommended. In fact, ideally, somebody has already been through an operator qualification class, so they get all that hands-on experience, and they've tested through that before they would come to this. The reality is that if somebody has no experience or very little experience and they try to come to this class, excuse me, they're going to find it very challenging. And then lastly, because this is moving to this online format, this class is going to be removed from the McElroy Certified Instructor Program. Now, there's only a few MCIs that teach this class anyhow, and we've got plans to help you out in the future I'll talk about in just a minute. But moving forward, this class will only be available online, and that frees up our certified instructors to focus on the operations training, which is really where there's a lot of demand out in the field, and they feel a great need out there. Okay, so what does the rollout look like for this? Well, first I want to talk a little bit more about the MCI offering runout. So in other words, if you're a McElroy certified instructor today that is authorized to teach the inspector qualification class, if you have anything currently scheduled, we want you to keep those schedules. So we don't need you calling up your customers and saying, hey, I just found out at Infusion that I can't teach this class anymore. No, we don't want that. So keep those schedules. However, anything that you've got planned now does need to include the new modules. So if you have something coming up, we need to have a conversation so that we can make sure you are all set on that. And then regardless, everything must be completed by December 31st of this year. So after that, the in-person classes go away. It's 100% online. Now, this online offering is happening now. In fact, we've already had a class about a month and a half ago, and it was a great class. One of the things that was great about it was the fact that we had a really good mix of students. So it was a good trial run, if you will. That included a McElroy certified instructor who was authorized to teach the class, so obviously they were very familiar. We had another student who was coming in for a new qualification. It had been a little while since he had been to the class, but he had been there multiple times, so he had a really good perspective of how the class had been run in the past. And then we had several students who had experience out in the field but had never taken this particular class before. Some of them had never taken any McElroy University training before. The end result was that everybody had a great experience, and it went really well, and we got some great feedback. So we know the model works, and we know it's going to be great moving forward. Okay, so moving on to my next topic here, I want to talk about protecting your investment. And in this, I'm getting into maintenance of the equipment. You know, McElroy equipment is designed to last a long time, but obviously it has to be maintained properly. And in this little graphic here, you see we've got kind of a little cycle here where we use the machine and then it comes back into the shop and there's some maintenance maybe that needs to be done or some repair, and then you use it again, you maintain it, repair it, and so on, right? So as long as you keep a good schedule and you've got well-trained mechanics, then you can protect that investment for a long, long time. However, our troubleshoot and rebuild classes were ripe for some improvement. We've had some questions along the way, and I'll talk more about that. But let's talk about what the impression has been for McElroy troubleshoot and rebuild programs or classes. So the impression has been this. It's 3 classes, TR 101, 201, and 301. Small diameter, medium, and large, right? Seems simple enough. And if you're a McElroy distributor, then you have the opportunity to send people through all 3 of those classes, and they can come back for a master mechanic assessment. So seems simple. That's the impression. But let's look at what the reality is. So the reality is there's a lot that goes on in one of these classes. And if you're not able to read everything that's on the screen here, it's okay. In fact, that's kind of the point. And what we're looking at here is the topic list for only the medium diameter troubleshoot and rebuild class. This is a lot of material to go through, and some of it's not specific to the machine. I mean, you've got things on there like basic electrical theory. We talk about Ohm's law, and we haven't even talked about equipment yet. So a lot of material to go through in a relatively short amount of time. So as we've listened to what customers have been asking us and what our channel partners are telling us they need, we've also asked our own questions. So here's basically what has been asked of us. So first of all, people want more in-depth maintenance training programs. They want to be able to go and do those deeper dives into some of those topics. But at the same time, they want it to be suitable for all experience levels. And it should be customizable and bite-sized. So people don't necessarily want to take everything. They just want the information that they need at any given time. And then additionally, people want some continuing education opportunities. So as McElroy has evolved our equipment line, we've rolled out new machines, we've had to pack all that new information into the same classes. And it's created a challenge for some of the mechanics that maybe have already had previous training, and now they just want some incremental training on whatever the new latest and greatest machine is. So we want that continuing education opportunities. And then lastly, people would like to see some changes to our credentialing system. So everybody that comes through class right now, when they complete the class, they get a certificate. I mentioned before, if you're a channel partner or distributor, you can also get that master mechanic credential. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot for people to show off and tout and get real excited about. So we want some training credentials that move along and show how someone is progressing through the training. So as we've considered all of this, we do have to think about the student, right? Who is coming to McElroy University training, and what are they looking for? And what kind of skill level do they have? So at one end, we've got the entry-level student. So these are people that are typically brand new to maintenance. They've often worked in another field, and they may or may not have exposure to McElroy equipment. In fact, it is not unusual for us to have students come in that literally are within their first month or 2 on the job. You know, they got the job and it just so happened the timing worked out. The first thing they do is get sent to McElroy University, which is great, but they don't have any experience at all. So this might be their first time touching McElroy equipment, or at least being around it in this way. Then at the other end, you've got your advanced students. So these are students that are highly experienced. They're often educated through a trade school or similar. And they have experience with McElroy equipment or possibly some other construction equipment. So they're used to that type of environment where you're working with equipment that's outside in the elements, it gets dirty, and some of those challenges. So it's great. We can cater to both of these students, but it's not unusual for us to have both of these types of students in the same class. So then it's a balancing act. How do I make sure that the advanced student gets that in-depth information that they want, but I don't go too fast or too deep for the entry-level student who is just getting started? So we've looked out into the industry for some best practices that we could follow to update our troubleshoot and rebuild program. So here's some of the models that we looked at. So the first one that popped up on the screen there is Firestone. Firestone's got a great program for training their mechanics through various levels. That next one over that looks like a helmet, that's the Spartan School of Aeronautics. It's a aerospace school here in Tulsa that you can go be a pilot, but they also have a nationally renowned mechanics school. You see down in the other corner, airframe and power plant certified technician. And then lastly, the Automotive Service Excellence Program, or ASE. You walk into just about any dealership in the country, go out into their shop, and you'll see ASE certificates all over the walls showing the level of training that their mechanics have. We've actually got people on staff who have been through some of these programs, so we have some great intimate knowledge about how they work, and we're able to pull some of the best elements out of those and incorporate it into the McElroy Service Excellence Program. So along with that comes some new validations. Or new credentialing. Now, these credentials are available only for our channel partners. End users can take the classes that I'll talk about here in a minute, but we do want to hold out the credentialing for our distributors because they are the best connected to us. They have direct access for parts and so on. But let's take a look at what those credentials are. So we start out with the McElroy Service Technician badge. Now, I should point out that there are multiple options here in that it's not just one badge and you're covered for everything. You could be a McElroy Service Technician for just manual equipment for polyethylene, or maybe just manual equipment for polypropylene, or just medium diameter hydraulics. So you can have any of those or all of those, but it gives those mechanics an opportunity to get that incremental training. Once they've moved beyond that and are ready to progress to the next level, we get to the McElroy Repair Technician, and then the ultimate goal is the McElroy Master Technician. So it's a very progressive. All three of these work very similar. Of course, the Master Technician has everything, but otherwise you've got those increments in the others as well. So let's take a look at what the path is for that initial credential. So this is the flow chart, and you can see that there's multiple ways to get to the end. The end is those boxes up in the upper corner there. But let's take a little bigger look at this, and you can get a kind of a closer look as to how that works. But I want to walk through just a scenario here where, let's say I'm a McElroy channel partner, so that makes me eligible for the qualification, the badge, and I have someone that I want to go through and just get it for manual equipment for polyethylene. So let's take a look at what that path looks like. So first of all, we start up here in the corner. And then one thing that's very unique to this program now is it starts out with a test, or at least the opportunity to take a test. So if you have a mechanic that maybe already has experience and you don't feel it's necessary for them to come to training for some basic information, they can take a test. If they pass the test, they just move on to the next level, which I'll talk about here in just a second. If they don't pass the test, or if they're new, then they can go online and take our maintenance boot camp or our maintenance fundamentals class, where they'll learn topics like basic electrical, basic hydraulics, and basic mechanics. We'll also cover topics like McElroy resources, so think the parts finder and using those types of tools. Now, this class is one that is open to the public as well. However, for the channel partners, they'll have a special version that will also cover some channel partner-only material. But once I've gone through that class, then again, for the channel partners, they can go back up, they can take that test again, or maybe take it for the first time. If they don't pass, they can review the material online, they'll still have access to that, gives them an opportunity to learn and study until they're ready to move on. But once they pass the test, they move on to the next level, and if they pass the service tech test, that's their next opportunity, then they can ultimately get the credential. And remember, you can take these as it makes sense for any individual. So if somebody wants to take the tests only for, say, medium diameter hydraulic for polyethylene because that's where they've been working for the last however many years, then they can do that. But if they need to go a different route for the large diameter, or maybe they're not familiar with the polypropylene tools, then they simply won't take the tests for that. They'll just go through the other path. So let's take a look at what that path looks like. So again, this is the scenario where I'm looking for that small diameter manual equipment for polyethylene. So after I've taken the boot camp, the fundamentals class, there's a little boot camp review, fundamentals review, and assessment. It just gives us an opportunity for us to have some conversations with the student to make sure that they're ready to move on. And this can actually happen before they take the test if they want. So if somebody's gone through and they're new and they've taken that online class, we can spend some time with them, answer any questions they've got. We want them to be successful. Then they can go in. But otherwise, they'll move on from here into something very basic, which is just basic maintenance for manual equipment. So we're really starting at the ground floor here. Let's just get on the machines, talk about the things, the ordinary things that need to be done to keep the machines in good working order. Once they've completed that, they move on to setup and run out for polyethylene. And again, there is a polypropylene version of this, and you can see that just next to this box, but we're following this path here. So once they've done setup and run out for polyethylene, then they're on to heater repair for the one-phase electrical. Now this class also covers the medium diameter hydraulic machines. So as these students go through these paths, there will be times that they'll be grouping up together, taking that same material, even though they might be on a different route. Once they've passed on to that, they go to facial repair for the small diameter. Once they've completed the facial repair, they've passed everything, passed all the tests and assessment along the way, then they get that credential. So it works pretty much the same way for the next levels. As the mechanics go through and exhaust their options there, they'll move on to the McElroy repair technician, ultimately McElroy master technician. You can see a flow chart here, very similar paths. I'm not going to go into detail on that now, but I think you get the idea. So let's talk about the benefits of this particular training program in this model. So first of all, now we're talking career paths, not just classes. So in the past, it pretty much was just a class. People would come, they'd take the class, maybe they come back at a later time to get new material, but now we really are giving them a path to build their career. And hopefully that means that people will stay in the industry longer, they'll stay at your organizations longer, and they'll just, over time, increase their depth of knowledge about McElroy equipment. Obviously, the training is much more focused and in-depth, and that matches that initial ask. So that's very important. We can get people the detail that they want and how they want it. The training itself under this model can now easily continuously evolve. So with the I-Series machines rolling out, you can see how what we all will need to do there, I say all we'll need to do, it's a big effort, but what we'll need to do there is just simply create a new path. So you'll have manual machines, you'll have hydraulic machines, you'll have large diameters, and then you have a different path for the I-Series. And that can continue on as we move into the future and allows people to get that enhanced credentialing, that incremental training along the way. And that can give you a competitive advantage. So again, if you're a channel partner and you've got people with these credentials, then it's a way to set you apart from maybe others in the industry. Okay, so now I want to talk about the rollout of this. So here's what's going to happen in the fourth quarter of this year. So we're going to first roll out the proficiency test and the service tech test. So if you have mechanics on staff now that already have some skill sets, they don't necessarily need to come through any training to get those initial credentials. They'll be able to go online, take the proficiency test, take the service tech test that makes sense for them. If they pass, they'll get the credential and they can move on. We're also planning to roll out the fundamentals module, though. So if you have those new mechanics or you have somebody that maybe needs a refresher or some additional training, they will be able to go online and start doing the fundamentals training and then back up into the tests. Now, we do recognize that some of our distributors may have some special needs for some training that maybe doesn't fit to our current classes, and they're not quite ready for this new program. So if that's a situation that you have, we are going to try to do some custom training or some hybrid troubleshoot and rebuild training over the next few months to help everyone get transitioned over. And then, so if that's something that you need, just let me know. And then additionally, if you're a master mechanic, don't worry about your credential. Your credential is intact. At the moment, we will be reaching out to all of our master mechanics and getting with them individually to talk about the process for converting them over into this new program. It's not a straight conversion, but there is a path, and you'll still be able to have that great credential and be able to post that on your websites and so on. So again, we'll be reaching out, but if you're a master mechanic, get with us after Infusion, and we'll go into more detail. And then in the first quarter of 2021, we'll roll out those technician level classes. So that'll be the beginning of the rollout of the training. It's going to be a long rollout. It's going to be over time as we continuously add modules and whatnot. So a lot of it will happen very quickly. Some will happen later on. But you'll start seeing all of that roll out in the first quarter, and people can start on that career path. Okay, so I want to talk now about the future. Which is great. Something I know, again, in pandemic world, we all are looking forward to better times and when we can get back and do the things we want to do. But I want to reference this picture on the screen here. You may recognize this as from the movie The Princess Bride. So that's Wesley in the black, and that's Buttercup in the pink or red dress, whatever. I'm going to get into that internet debate. Is it pink, is it red? But in that dress. And they're about to enter into the fire swamp. And the challenge that they have ahead of them is that they know they have to get to the other side. So they have a clear goal in sight. They want to get to the other side, but they don't know what lies ahead of them. It's very scary, and they're not really sure how they're going to get through it. But I like this analogy from McElroy University because that's often the case for us. This year has been a great example where we're looking ahead, and we have a very clear goal in sight always, which is to provide the best possible training in the industry and to continue that leadership. But sometimes it's a little scary, and we're not really sure what that road is going to be like. But we just get in there and plow forward and move on and do what we need to do. So with that in mind, consider this quote. Virtually nothing on earth can stop a person with a positive attitude who has his goal clearly in sight. So again, very much McElroy University attitude. We know what our goal is. We keep a positive attitude and we move forward. And then ultimately, just like Wesley and Buttercup, we'll get through the fire swamp and out into better pastures. All right, so with that in mind, let's talk about the roadmap, some additional plans that we have moving into the future that I think you'll find really interesting. So first is some new training partnership opportunities. So that comes in a couple of different opportunities that we have here. And the first one is co-branding. So if you have a situation where it would make sense for you to have co-branded training materials, that way when your customers are going through training, they're seeing both the McElroy brand and your brand, and they get that enhanced experience, if you will, then let us know about that, and we can talk to you more about setting that up for you. Additionally, we often get requests about licensing our material. We have a lot of people that have situations where they have some training that needs to be done that maybe isn't operator qualification training, maybe it's just new employee onboarding, and they would like to use some of our materials to enhance that training program. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'd like to have that conversation with you, and we'll see what we can do to make that happen. Additionally, we're able to do more custom white label content. Now, the success of our online training has been so high that we've actually had people from elsewhere in the industry reach out to us and say, hey, McElroy University, I saw that your online modules, I saw what you created. We have a need for something that we want to use internally. Is that something that you could develop for us? So similar to how our engineering department might do some custom engineering, we can help you with some custom courseware, some custom content. This is not entirely new for McElroy. We've done this kind of project work in the past with videos, but now we can help you out with that for the online learning as well. So again, if that's something that you have a need for, just let us know. And then additionally, we will continue to expand our course catalog. So last year, the big focus was on operations training. This year, troubleshoot and rebuild. Of course, that will continue on for a while. We'll continue to enhance that. But along with that, we will also be growing our training catalog in other ways. And this is especially going to be applicable to engineers. We hear a lot of engineers will reach out to us and say, hey, I'd like to take your training, the online piece. I don't necessarily need the hands-on because I'm not going to be the one operating the equipment, but I really need to know that theory and how the operations work. Earlier this year, in response to COVID, we did make some of that information available on a limited basis so that people could have something to learn from while they were locked down. But we'll continue to expand that catalog and make that available so that engineers can earn their continuing education units or PDHs or just a lot of topics so that other people in the industry will have information that is worthwhile to them as well. And then lastly, many of you have participated in our McElroy University Socially Distant Learning series that we started earlier this year. This series has been tremendously successful and it's been a lot of fun to produce. So much so that we will continue with this series. And we're going to continue with this the same way we've been doing with our regularly scheduled presentations. However, what a lot of people may not realize is that probably about 15% of the presentations that we've done throughout the year have actually been private presentations, ones that weren't open to the public. Same general format, but it was a distributor or a customer called us and said, look, we would like a presentation just on this topic or just to cover this. So it's great for those situations where if you're not able to get out to see your customers or you're not able to travel like you want to, or they can't come to you, reach out to us. We can help you with the presentation, deliver that information, whether it's about operations or almost a virtual sales call, whatever the case may be. Just let us know. We can help you facilitate that and make it work out for you.
All right, everybody, looks like we're ready with some live Q&A here. We've got Paul with me. My name is Jesse Smith. I'm training coordinator for McElroy University. I'm going to be helping Paul take some of these questions today. I want to remind everybody that you can submit your question in the upper right corner of your screen in the chat box. And if you see a question that's similar to the one you want to ask or that you just like, go ahead and hit that upvote button, and we'll move it to the top of the list, and that's the order we're going to try to take these in. So Paul, looks like there's some really big changes and some exciting things happening with McElroy University in the coming year. And we've got some good questions starting to roll in, and I'll go ahead and start here.
Great.
The first one that's been moved to the top of the list centers around the maintenance training that you outlined, and it is how much of the new maintenance training will be available online?
So yeah, that's a great question. Beyond that first module, there will be elements that are going to be online. I'm going to stop short of giving a percentage because some of it will depend on how much people are going through. But in just about every case, there will be at least some element of online training prior to somebody being in front of us. Some pieces might, like a setup and run out, could be 100% online. But something about heaters or facers would be a small portion online, but then they would come to us to actually get that hands-on, taking things apart, putting it back together. So it will vary depending on the class and the route that people take, but online will be a significant part of it throughout the whole program.
Yeah, that's been a trend for us with all of our courses, really. Even before all this COVID stuff started to happen, we were kind of moving in a direction anyway, where some portion of training happens before you ever get to Tulsa. And I would expect that with any of the topics that we're going to cover in maintenance training, it would be sort of the same approach.
Right. Well, and it's been helpful, just to expand on that a little bit, one of the greatest things that we've learned along the way is that when people do the online training beforehand, they come here already knowing what the expectations are, but they're also just a little bit more prepared. So they've maybe seen a heater being repaired or some basics. So it's not completely foreign, and people don't come so wide-eyed and glassy-eyed. So it's been a great evolution.
Yeah, I think it's been helpful for the students and also our instructor staff as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our MCIs, that they've been able to limit the amount of time they've had to travel to go do trainings. Our students have been able to limit the amount of time that they've had to travel to come to trainings as well. It's been a good deal for everybody involved.
Right, absolutely.
Next one, moved up to the top of the list here along the same path, talking about maintenance again. Can distributors take maintenance training courses without testing out of or taking those basic maintenance courses?
So the short answer is yes. In fact, I'm glad that question was asked, in that there will be instances where you may have people on your staff that it would be beneficial for them to have some training, but they're not the mechanic. They're not going to be the person working on it, but it would be good for them to have some basic knowledge to make them, in some terms, people call them power users in the computer world, or at least more knowledgeable. So we know that a lot of our distributors in particular have people that, maybe their primary responsibility is sales, but they will find themselves out in the field on occasion. So they can come through, take those classes just for the knowledge that it will bring them, so that if they're the one out in the field and if there is a problem, we wouldn't necessarily expect them to do the troubleshooting themselves, but now all of a sudden they become a little bit more of an expert, so that when they're on the phone with the technician, they've got some advanced knowledge and they can get through that a lot quicker. So yeah, absolutely, people will be able to come through and effectively audit classes if that's what they want to do.
So does that also apply to somebody who is not a distributor? If an end user, contractor has a an individual that they want to just get some training, they don't necessarily have to go for that credential either, do they?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be open to them pretty much the same way. The only caveat that I would put on that is, in some cases, you don't want to jump too far ahead. So there's a path. I mean, if somebody, doesn't know how to use a multimeter, doesn't have that experience, they probably don't want to jump into, three-phase electrical repair on a large diameter machine as their first class. So
right. that really is the purpose of those basic courses is to level the playing field so that we wind up with folks that are all sitting in the same room together and they all have a similar level of experience. As best we can do that anyway. So if you're going to send somebody to a higher level course, it's upon you at that point. If they don't have the experience or the previous training necessary to handle it, we're not really going to be able to slow down and accommodate that as well. So
absolutely,
a bit of a risk by sending somebody without going to those basic maintenance courses.
Yep.
Move on here. Let's see. Next one is, will there be a difference in cost for the online courses versus in person?
So the short answer to that is no, but primarily because it's not an either or. The course is the course. So similar to our operations training now, if you come here for, an operator qualification and manual butt fusion, the online training is part of it. So as each of those elements will have the pricing that will be released as these roll out, and it'll have that online piece, it'll have that hands-on piece, and then you'll go from there. So they won't be separated out like that. Hopefully that answers the question. I think that.
I think it does, and it also sort of leads us into the next one. So we'll just go ahead and move to it, and that is, why not move the operator courses to 100% online?
So yeah, it's a great question. It's one that people would actually, I should say, it's a very popular question as well. The challenge on the operator qualification is that at some point you've got to get hands-on on the machine, and I equate it a lot to learning how to drive a car. There's a lot I can teach you about driving a car online. I can teach you rules of the road. I can teach you what a stoplight is supposed to do, which one is the gas pedal, which one's the brake pedal. But at some point, you've got to get hands-on a machine. And we have not crossed that barrier yet where we can easily do that without actually being there. There's so much value in an instructor and a student being, shoulder to shoulder in front of the machine that we're not quite there. So we're getting as close as we can to it as possible, but that one will still stay that way. And same thing here as well. There's a lot that we can teach people online, but Jesse, better than I do. There are little tips and tricks, and it's one thing to show somebody how to maybe rebuild a cylinder or take it apart, but to watch them do it and be able to correct them along the way has a tremendous value that it's very difficult, if possible at all, to replicate 100% virtually.
Yeah, and in my mind, if I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, well, then why are you able to do the inspector's course 100% online? And the way I look at that is, it's one of the reasons why we're strongly suggesting that you need to have that training, that operator training beforehand, so that you've already picked up on those tips, tricks, and industry best practices and the nuance of running different pieces of fusion equipment. And our hope is that you have that solid foundation, and then when we move into the inspector's course, that's not something that we then have to teach at that point, and we can a higher level.
Well, and something to add to that on the inspector course is, when you think about what an inspector is doing, they are very focused on observation and understanding the rules and the procedures and all of that. So you're right. It's best if they have that core knowledge of how to actually operate the machine. But as that class has evolved, there's so much more emphasis on making sure they know those details. That one's a little bit easier to move online. And as anybody who's come through that class knows, that the testing focus on that has not always been about the inspector's ability to fuse pipe. It's been about their ability to understand the process, not only the equipment, but the standard itself. So a little bit of a different animal there. It's unique in that sense. So it allows us to do that, but it is definitely a little different.
Yeah, I like your car example. I was thinking about a driver's ed instructor. You know, if I'm going to pass a test or pass somebody saying, you're a good driver now, you're driving correctly, I probably should know how to drive a car in the first place. That's kind of the same.
Well, and just to add to that, for all the, for all the old folks online, some of you may remember, and I honestly, I don't know how it's done today, been a little out of it, but, when I was learning to drive, we had simulators, and we all sat in a room, and it's these big giant video game things. And, that I can tell you right now, that in no way prepares you how to drive a car. So it was fun, but
you're showing your age a little bit, Paul. We have these things called virtual reality headsets.
Yeah. Get the glasses, the goggles. I have my Google Cardboard glasses. I can use those.
There you go. I'd like to see that. Next one here, I think this one's going back to the maintenance training again. It is, will there be any patches or banners that we will be able to display?
Yeah, so not initially, but that is something that, we'll have, virtual patches, the certificates and things that people get. And then over time, as this evolves, we do fully intend to have, signage and things that people can put on the walls, put on their coats or their work shirts, whatever it is, so that they can proudly display that. So that'll be an ever evolving piece of it that we do expect to happen over time.
When I was in the automotive industry, that's kind of where I came up. And I know that as a young mechanic in training, seeing the older guys with a shirt sleeve full of patches was something that you really looked up to and really wanted to try to reach that level. So I would hope that whatever we can do be something similar along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Next one here, again with maintenance. Is there any preventative maintenance schedule available for different models of equipment?
Actually, Jesse, I'm going to let you answer that question directly. You're a lot closer to that detail than I am.
Yeah. All of our operator manuals have this in them. When it comes to preventative maintenance, we're generally speaking, we're talking more about engines and cooling systems and things like that. And our preventative maintenance recommendations are always going to fall back to the manufacturer of that equipment. So for instance, if you have a Trackstar with a Kubota engine in it, your oil changes, your fuel filters, your air filters, your cooling system, all that stuff goes back to Kubota. In most cases, like if you're coming in Cummins engines, we have the engine manual right there with the machine. So that they are there. They're not necessarily in the product manual for that piece of equipment, but we do our best to try to transfer as much of that information over into our product manuals as possible. So check there. As you're looking at the new stuff coming out with iSeries, that's something that's going to be more integrated into that user platform, where we'll have the ability to have that preloaded into those operating systems as far as what maintenance should be done on what intervals, and you'll have some control and adjustability over that as well. Looks like the next one in line here is what will happen with students that were going to take the large rebuild in June that was postponed due to COVID. We have had to postpone and in some cases even cancel some trainings this year. So I know this is something that's probably on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. So whoever that was, we will be reaching out. As we get on the other side of Infusion here, we're going to be taking another look at our calendar and reworking and really just doing what we've been doing throughout the year, which is, every month or so we look at the calendar and look ahead, plan out the best that we can. So, and that goes back to my comment before, so that if you still have a specific need, just let us know. But we do know that we have some people that we've been having to put off and because of COVID, and we'll have options there, right? So we can either bring them in, still provide that level of training, or we can start rolling them into the new program. It just really depends on everyone's individual need, but we'll make sure everyone gets taken care of as best as we can, as quickly as possible.
Would it be a fair statement to say that those folks that are out there that are carrying credentials now can sort of take a deep breath and not worry too much that we're really going to hold their feet to the fire on those recertifications, what happens to that? Or are we extending those, or?
Yeah, so you're talking like that would be really just the master mechanics on that. So if you're an existing master mechanic and your credential is getting ready to expire, yeah, don't worry. We're not going to call you up one day and say, that's it, you're no longer a master mechanic. We'll have a transition plan in place. There are going to be some things that we'll do probably online, almost exclusively initially, just to make sure that we get them updated on the latest material. Usually that's the reassessment is all about updates anyhow. So we can make sure that, they're still in the loop on things that have changed in the last, 2 to 4 years. But then we'll continue to progress and move people over. And in many cases, a lot of our master mechanics should be good to go as soon as we roll out all those initial tests. Most of them will be able to take those tests, get online, and just get started right away in the new program.
Yeah, and something else to consider too is just looking at the layout of that new program that you showed us. Master mechanic in the future may not necessarily mean the same thing that master mechanic means.
Right.
So keep that in mind, that we're adding some things, we're adding some courses. There's a new level of complexity to the equipment. So, if you're a master mechanic now, you may retain some level of certification, but it may not be called master mechanic anymore. So
right.
Keep that in mind and try to be flexible with us.
Yeah, and we understand
making some big changes here.
Yeah, and we understand that for a lot of distributors, that's not only a badge of honor, but it's something that they use as a competitive advantage and all that kind of stuff. So rest assured, this is a rollout, right? So it's going to be certain elements, and it's some things are going to happen quickly, some will roll out over time. Obviously there's a big body of work, especially with the I-Series in there. We've got the whole new curriculum, so we'll make sure everyone remains whole along the way. And has the right credentialing at the right time and can retain that competitive advantage.
Okay. Let's see here. Here's one maybe from our international folks. Will there be online trainings in Spanish or other languages? And if so, when might that happen?
So yes, and I don't know. So we have been making every effort possible to translate our material into Spanish in particular and other languages as we can, as quickly as possible. It's a process. It does take some time. We want to make sure the core version is done right, and so that we can get it translated. We don't have to go back and make multiple changes. So what I can really, the short answer on that is, again, what I said before. Yes, we will work to continue to translate everything into Spanish. Don't have a particular time frame on that, but it's as quickly as we possibly can on all of those.
I know our guys in our international team here spend a lot of time trying to get translations done.
Right.
It's a labor-intensive task for them to do that, and I know they work really hard on it. Let's see here. Here's another one, probably from the international side. So this one says, could training be delivered under the old, air quotes, model? Some customers abroad don't have internet or availability for access to a PC.
So my standard answer on that has always been, yeah, let's have that conversation. Let's understand exactly what their need is. One of the nice things about this online training, the tools that we use, there is some ability to be able to preload courses, say like on an iPad or a tablet or something along those lines. So we recognize that not everybody is going to have easy internet access everywhere. But we always want to understand what that need is first, and then we work to do what we can to accommodate. So it's not an automatic, oh yeah, absolutely, just get these slides or whatever it is. But we do take that on a case-by-case basis and accommodate the best that we can.
Can you maybe expand on what our experience so far has been with that? I know, we've already been doing quite a bit of this online and asking folks to handle modules through our LMS online. And really, we've had very few problems with it. So maybe could you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the operations side, obviously that's where the big online piece has really been rolling out. as far as I know to date, and we've had the online modules as a part of this. I think this is probably year 3. I think we're past year 3. We're moving into 4, and we have yet to have anybody tell us that they were not able to take the class because they could absolutely not get online. Quite frankly, the only challenge that we typically run into is when it comes to testing. So there have been situations where people are able to take the online training because they can go to a coffee shop, they can go somewhere else, they can watch it on their phone at home, whatever the case is. So they get through the online piece, but wherever the actual training happens and the testing might be in a location that truly doesn't have internet. And in that case, then we can easily have paper tests that the instructor has with them. They pass them out, they handle the testing that way. But so far, I've had a lot of people question it, but nobody has come back and told me they can't do it. And we had a lot of grace period there for a while where we told people they could do either format. But now everyone starts online, and it has not been a complete barrier.
Yeah, I know early on I went out and delivered a training and experienced a little bit of that with some security and firewall stuff at the location I was doing the test, and we did have to revert to a paper test. So there is a plan B. The easiest way is going to be to follow the online format, but
right.
We can accommodate sometimes as necessary. So we've got just a couple more here. I'm going to go ahead and throw this next one on the highlight list. And forgive me, whoever asked this, I'm going to cut the front part of it off. We appreciate the kudos, but this question is it possible to get a customized roadmap in order to continue to train all courses within an established market, operator qualifications, inspector qualifications, et cetera? So it sounds like we're looking for maybe potentially a way to continue to handle that inspector's course.
Yeah. So, without it just being a flat no, I'd like to, whoever that was, please reach out to me. Let me have a better understanding of what your needs and concerns are. If it's related to the inspector qualification class, it is the intent for that to be 100% online and self-paced. There aren't too many people, as I mentioned in the presentation, that teach that class. So if you're one of those people that teaches it on occasion, let's have that conversation. But what's important to remember is that one of the more critical aspects of what we've been doing with McElroy University is consistency. It's focusing on consistency. And the online piece has been a huge factor in helping to ensure that every student that comes through gets very close to the exact same experience, regardless of who ultimately the instructor is. So if we start diverting from that too much, then it changes that. And I'll add one thing, and I know we're almost up on time here, but that consistency is one that when we talk to people here about McElroy University, we talk about our MCIs. That's been a huge selling point that customers really like. So they say, do I need to come to Tulsa for that? Well, actually, you can come to Tulsa, or you can go through any of our McElroy certified instructors and get the exact same experience. And many of you've gotten a call or an email from me. Hey, I've got a customer who needs some training. They're 2 hours away from you. Why don't you give them a call? So that's what allows us to do that. So if we get too far away from that, we lose that advantage.
I think too, it's important to remember that the inspector qualification traditionally, has kind of been a remix, if you will, of operator qualification,
Right.
With a different spin on it. And this new course is very, very different from that.
Right.
So I think there's a new opportunity for these MCIs to really dig in on the operators qualifications with an add-on of an online course. So it's not that you're losing an opportunity here, it's that you're gaining a different opportunity and not necessarily having to go in and add on or spend more time in front of that customer where they can handle that on their own after you leave. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great way of putting it, for sure.
All right. It's like we have maybe time for one more here. Another one just popped in. So this one, interesting question. So for different materials, example being, say, PA12, is there training provided for that?
So right now, all of our, I assume we're talking operations training on this. So so right now, all of our training was built around polyethylene. In an earlier session, Jeff Turner and I talked about polypropylene training. That being said, we have certainly done trainings before that involve different materials and different fusion standards. So often those have been custom. Maybe it's a utility that has their own standard. I know, Jesse, you've done a lot of trainings where we first learn their standard, then go do the training. I can tell you that on PA12 specifically, we've had some requests. As those come up more, then we can address those a little bit more specifically. But short answer is yes, we can handle other materials, we can handle other standards. Those would typically be done in a more custom environment, and we would just need some leeway to be able to do that. Most of our online training is about the process and the use of the machine, and then the in-person piece is where we get into the standard and any nuances about the material. So easily done. We just need to talk about it beforehand.
Right, and you know, doing a custom training for a custom product is something that we can do. One thing that has set our training apart here within the last couple of years is that we train our operators in accordance with ASTM F3190.
Right.
And you know, if we do a custom course for a material like PA12 or something of that nature, it may not be a 3190 course, but it would still be valuable in quality training. So
yeah, and in many cases, even if with a different material and a different standard, it still complies with 3190. Yeah. So
yeah, good.
It's a very flexible, and we get to be able to do a lot there.
Okay, well, we are just right up against the wall on time here. I don't see any new questions coming in, so right. Just want to remind everybody that you know, we're always available to take your questions anytime. MCU@McElroy.com. Send us an email, reach out to Paul or myself directly, and we will try to help handle any training needs that you have. So we really appreciate everybody's time, not only for this presentation, but for showing up and being here with us at this year's Infusion as well. Paul, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I'm good. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for attending. You know, obviously, I encourage you, if you we know you had choices on sessions. I appreciate you coming to this one live. Go back and watch the others, and yeah, just reach out to us with any questions, and we'll just keep moving on down the road and making things better and better.
All right. Thanks again, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, everyone.